Hey, this is Brent Leary, and with me right now is Evan Goldberg. Evan is the EVP of Oracle NetSuite. He's also the co-founder of NetSuite before it was Oracle NetSuite. So, Evan, hey, thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me.
So you got a lot going on. There's always a lot going on. We're in the midst of this pandemic, and there's a lot of things that companies are trying to do to stay in business. Just maybe off the top of your head, what are you hearing from your customers about the current state? We're about 6-7 months into the pandemic. What are you hearing from them, and maybe how has that changed since the beginning of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I think the beginning of the pandemic was a shock for a lot of companies. There were a few companies for whom it was kind of an immediate boost. I mean, one of our customers is Postmates, who does food delivery, so they kind of had an immediate shot in the arm, I guess you might say. But most of the customers definitely experienced a shock of radically decreased demand. And it's interesting how many of the companies responded. We've had a ton of companies adopt NetSuite during the pandemic. Some companies are taking sort of the time they have to sort of retrench a little bit. They're looking at obviously changing a lot of the ways they do business, going more remote employees, using more remote tools. So I think in taking stock of that, some of them said, how do we tool ourselves so we come out of the, sort of economic downturn stronger? So I think once that initial shock sort of subsided, a lot of companies are using the time to plan for, what we hope is an inevitable sort of return to form.
Yeah, you mentioned that kind of the overnight switch when people had to shelter in place. And before they were sheltering in place, a lot of folks were just buying stuff, going to the store, buying their food in the grocery stores. And then like overnight, they just couldn't. And so they had to go online to buy stuff. And
right.
Yeah. So it's like now that some of these folks are forced into it, maybe they didn't think they would have to do it before. They didn't want to do it before. But then once they had to do it, they found out it wasn't all that bad. And so how many of these changes in consumer behavior do you think are going to carry over once we kind of get past this pandemic?
Oh, I think some of these changes they won't turn back. I mean, we have a company, Bedford Industries, that made like ties for bread packaging, and they retooled really quickly to make PPE. And then they found that they were, making it just to help sort of, local hospitals, et cetera. But they found that they had so much demand for it that and this is a B2B company, but they put up a direct-to-consumer website on NetSuite, like in a few days, and suddenly they were selling PPE to the general public. So, I mean, I don't know whether they'll continue to do that, but I think that the fact that they saw that there's a channel there for them to sell direct to consumer is probably pretty interesting. And I think the eyes have maybe been opened for a lot of companies. I mean, we make it super easy to get a website up and running based on your inventory. And so, yeah, we've definitely seen customers have an urge to do that during this time, just to reach more consumers and reach and make it easier also for their B2B customers to order and interact with them when they can't, do it in person anymore.
Talk about the kind of the power of the platform, because customer experience has kind of never been more affected by things like supply chain management before. Right. And if you don't have that right, the effect it has on the customer experience can be like tragic. Maybe talk a little bit more about how you're helping customers manage this, this transition or the transformation between supply chain and providing that in a way that makes it easy for the consumer to feel comfortable about what they're getting from you.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it, initially were sort of supply shocks where they couldn't get their supplies from, Asia in particular towards the beginning of the crisis. And now, in some cases it's flipped, that's like the best place to order things from. So basically these businesses have to be prepared for radical shifts in supply chain. They have to diversify. We have a customer Nadamu, who's a dairy-free ice cream maker, and they moved some of their supply chain from Asia to Mexico, sort of closer to home. But by doing that, they're sort of diversifying and making themselves more resilient to shocks. And a lot of what we work on in NetSuite is helping customers be resilient to changes in the supply chain. So we announced in our most recent release a new supply planning engine that lets them, plan based on anticipated demand, but then also can be rerun, frequently as conditions change, as they inevitably do in this sort of turbulent time.
And when you think about the term digital transformation, you're hearing a lot of folks say that, of course, the pandemic has accelerated digital transformation. But how do you think the definition of digital transformation, what it means to your customers, how do you think that's changed?
Well, it's a pretty all-encompassing term, and our customers were using digital computers before. I mean, so for our customers, it's been really a cloud transformation. And the other major transformation that we hear a lot of customers are really interested in is decreasing complexity. They have a lot of different systems that they've accumulated over the years, and they really want to decrease that to just a few. And sort of that's where NetSuite comes in, because we can provide, sort of a one-stop shop for a lot of your needs in your core operations, including HR, which is obviously critical for companies as they grow. So we've been building up our Suite People capabilities, which is what we call the HR component of our kind of integrated suite. And we're seeing increasing adoption of that as we add the capabilities that they need: onboarding, payroll, better and more sophisticated payroll capabilities, performance management, those kinds of things. So, that's really the big transformation I think that a lot of our companies are going through, is using the cloud and using it to simplify their systems.
And with that simplification of systems, does that also increase the opportunity for them to leverage newer technologies like AI and to be able to, kind of take that information coming from all these different systems and actually be able to use it in a way that can make the biggest impact?
Yeah, and that's absolutely the case. And one of the benefits we've had as becoming part of Oracle is we're able to leverage, their deep R&D investment in things like conversational UIs, which is obviously, uses natural language. And you're going to see increasingly in kind of future versions of NetSuite that we're integrating those capabilities. We're announcing this coming week the NetSuite Data Analytics Warehouse, which uses Oracle's powerful analytics engine and their autonomous data warehouse, which is their kind of flagship data warehouse capability, built all delivered via the cloud. To allow customers to do things like snapshotting, to better be able to see trends, and then also to combine their NetSuite data with other data from other systems to tie that together. So, just like in sort of AI and machine learning, all this stuff, we're leveraging the deep investments that Oracle is making, and we're going to bring them to the fast-growing, small and mid-sized business over the coming years.
Yeah, I got a chance to check out that press release. There was a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
Going over a lot of things. Maybe you could hit some of the other highlights of what's being announced next week.
Yeah. So, we have a lot of, I don't know if I'd call them meat and potatoes, but features that customers are demanding now. And increasingly people want really deep integration with their banks, so that all that is sort of automated reconciliation. So, your exact cash position at any time. And so we're doing that. We've added smart bank integration for banks all over the world, not just in the US, because we have a global customer base. So I think that's one of the most exciting things. As I said, the NetSuite data warehouse for some of our more sophisticated analytics warehouse for some of our more sophisticated customers. And it's just things that customers can kind of use now. There's on the kind of commerce or I guess customer interaction front, we announced expanded capabilities in what we call our My Account feature, which is basically for all types of customers to allow their clients and their customers to have a portal to see information about their account, pay their bills, If it's a subscription company, which increasingly, obviously, new businesses are, they can manage their subscription, add capabilities, upgrade, etc. So, that's certainly during this time. Our customers really are keen on features that let their customers interact with them in the kind of 24/7, 365, anywhere, anytime manner. So I think those are some of the key highlights for sure.
It's really cool to hear, instead, because a lot of companies kind of think of, or maybe thought of, digital transformation as more what I call a digital transition, which is like just automating processes that they already had and kind of making what they did do more efficient. And that's, maybe part of the deal. But when you think about transformation, you think of being able to use this technology and do things that you maybe couldn't do or even couldn't dream of doing,
Right.
and now you're adding it. So you're seeing some of that, because when you talk about making the switch or maybe adding subscription-based offerings on top of maybe what they did before, are you seeing more of these companies think outside the box and add and do things differently than before?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a trend for several years where there's not as much of a clean divide between product companies and service companies. Product companies want to deliver some of their goods as subscriptions. I mean, we see that all over the place with these subscription services for clothes and things like that. And service companies sometimes want to deliver products. I mean, we see that with some of these like sort of exercise, companies that have both a product and a service. So these sort of hybrid business models require something like NetSuite that can sort of handle, both sides of the equation. And I think you're right that AI and ML and those kinds of things are increasingly important on both sides. So one of the things that we're doing for both service companies and product companies is predicted risks. So, if you're a product company, it's all about, are you shipping your goods on time, and satisfying your customer in that way. They want the right product at the right time. So we can predict risks based on past, shipments to particular areas using particular carriers, and give you sort of, early warning that you might need to ship something out earlier to get it to the customer on time. Similarly, on a services side for project-based businesses, there's project risks. And again, looking at history, applying AI to kind of identify projects that might need a little extra TLC, before you start losing money or worse yet, losing clients. So that's where we're kind of taking a broad view of where you can apply AI and machine learning to really help customers now.
So when you think about, when we're finally past this pandemic, I hope it's sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you expect to see? What do you expect the climate to be like? What do you expect your customers to be facing at that point?
Right. Well, I'm not Nostradamus, so I don't actually know exactly what I think there's a lot of speculation that is just that. It's very clear that some of the things, as we talked about, some of the things that are happening are going to continue even when you can walk around and see people and go to parties and watch basketball games and all that good stuff. And so I think, historians will write how the world changed as a result of the pandemic in a few years. But I definitely think that many of the changes that are happening are really positive. I mean, why do you have to fly all over the country all the time for meetings that can effectively be done, remotely? That doesn't mean all meetings. There's definitely meetings that, you absolutely want to do face-to-face. But companies being able to be, a little more judicious about when they need to fly people around, I think is going to help with productivity. It's going to help with employee satisfaction. I mean, some employees like hopping on planes, but it gets tiring after a bit. So I think a lot of those things are going to allow, a lot of these changes are going to allow businesses to operate more efficiently. Definitely reaching their customers online in new ways that's going to stick, because that's what customers want, is just easy access at any time when they want to interact with you.
This has been a great conversation. One of the things that you talked about, you mentioned voice, and I remember, you probably don't remember this, but I think it was at the last Suite World. There was a little analyst media kind of thing, and I asked you a question about voice and where does it fit into enterprise applications, and it seems like that year is kind of maybe forwarded the role of voice that you see.
Yeah, I think voice is huge. I tell it to my team, on the product development side all the time, how important I think it's going to be. It's not for all interactions with your application. I mean, but it's for a lot of them. And I mean, some people say, well, in offices, is that realistic? Well, we have call centers right now, so obviously people can talk in offices. And I think it'll be weird maybe for a while. But I think, it's a very, very efficient way to communicate person to person. It could, in a lot of cases, be a very efficient and natural way to communicate person to computer and computer to person, especially person to computer. I mean, the ability to just ask for what you want in English, right, and it's going to be faster than typing. I mean, my wife beat the typing teacher, but she also talks really fast. So even she talks faster than she types. But, so I think it's huge.
It's great. It actually is reinforced by some of the messaging I heard from the Oracle folks too about, voice interfaces being something that seems like it's going to be kind of integral to a lot of the applications in the future. So that's great to hear. It is also just great to talk to you. And also, let me just thank you again. This is like the 10-year anniversary of me getting this nice piece of wearable swag. I wear this a lot, man. I continue to wear this a lot. And I just like the feel of it, man.
Well, that's great. I love the old school swag. Sure. I try to keep as much of it as I can.
So, Evan, this has been great. Where is there a place on the NetSuite site maybe to go and hear about and check out some of these announcements?
Well, definitely. If you go to the news section at netsuite.com, we'll have our press release and with all the exciting stuff we have for customers coming out soon, now or soon.